Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our channel, Obstetrics and Gynecology Teaching. The purpose of these videos are to help anyone and everyone who is interested in learning more about obstetrics and gynecology. So please do like and subscribe our channel if you like the videos and if you want any specific topics to be covered. Please do put it in comment section and I will try and cover it in future. I'm Himanshu Borse. I'm working as a gynecologist and fertility specialist in London. And today we are going to talk about embryology of the reproductive tract. So now we all probably know this already that the embryo's default sex is female, meaning if the embryo does not have a Y chromosome, then it will automatically develop into a female embryo. That's why all Turner embryos are females. There is a gene on Y chromosome which is called SRY gene, sex determining region of Y, which triggers the secretion of anti-Mullerian hormone, and that regresses the Mullerian ducts and allows the male reproductive system to develop. So we'll talk about how the embryo's sex and the genital system develops, both external as well as internal. So development of the ovary, the germ cells, they appear in the embryo around day 25 and they originate from the primitive hindgut. Now by day 30, the gut with its mesentery is formed and the germ cells will migrate from the gut to the root of the mesentery. We have got some illustrations on further slides, so when you look at them and listen to this again, it will make more sense. So these germ cells will migrate from the gut to the root of the mesentery, and originally there are about 6 to 7 million germ cells, of which only 1 to 2 million are present at birth and is reduced to 500,000 at puberty by the time of menarche. And to see, basically menarche is around 11 years of age average and menopause is 51, so a woman's reproductive lifespan is close to 40 years. So even if she ovulates every year without getting pregnant, in those 40 years she is only going to release 480 eggs during her reproductive lifespan, for which she's given 500,000 primary follicles, meaning when one egg is ovulated, close to 1,000 eggs are diminishing in size. And this rapid decline of these germ cells can lead to premature menopause. And you need both X chromosomes to maintain this cohort. And that's the reason that in women with Turner syndrome, there is the destruction of these follicles even before they are born, and what is left behind is just the skeleton of the ovary, which we call them streak ovaries. Around the same time, the coelomic epithelium proliferates and forms thickening known as genital ridges on either side of the mesenteric root near the developing kidneys. And that's the reason that Mullerian anomalies, which affect the uterus, are usually associated with renal anomalies. At this stage, the primitive gonad consists of mesoderm covered by coelomic epithelium, and these germ cells migrate from the root of the mesentery to the genital ridge. And the coelomic epithelium forms sex cords, which enclose each germ cells. Until the 7th week, the gonads are undifferentiated, and then based on the hormonal influence, the next differentiation will start. So as you can see, the primitive sex cords, and they are on either side, and they are close to the mesonephric tubules from which the kidneys are going to develop. You can see the structure of the gonads, hindgut, and the germ cells arising from the yolk sac, migrating towards the genital ridges. And same thing here, you can see that mesonephric ducts are close to the paramesonephric duct from which the fallopian tube and uterus is going to develop, and the coelomic epithelium forming the sex cords in which the primordial germ cells are enclosed. And in the bottom diagram, you can see how the cortex is formed, the medulla is formed, the mesonephric duct, part of it degenerates, and the paramesonephric tube will form the fallopian tubes and the uterus. So the superficial germ cells and the sex cord cells form the future cortex. Some of the sex cord cells grow into the medulla, but they tend to regress and form rudimentary tubules known as reti. And the same rudimentary tubules in testis will be known as retitestis. And the growing ovary projects into the peritoneum, forming a mesentery, also known as mesovarium, which supports it. Now, the ovary has two ligaments developed, and that prevents its descent through the inguinal ring, like the testes would do in a male child. One is a suspensory ligament anteriorly connecting to the genital ridge, and the second is gubernaculum, which attaches ovary to the uterus and becomes an ovarian ligament. And if you remember, the same gubernaculum is at the caudal end of the testis, which will shrink and get the testis descended into the scrotum around birth time. At day 35 to 36, so embryo is about 10 millimeters in size, and at this time a longitudinal groove appears on the dorsal aspect of the coelomic cavity lateral to the Wolffian ridge, and it seals off to form paramesonephric or Mullerian ducts. Now these Mullerian ducts will grow caudally, meaning down, and extraperitoneally, and they will fuse in front of the hindgut from which rectum is going to be formed. Eventually, the septum separating these two tubes disappears in the lower part, leading it to a single cavity. And incomplete absorption of this septum leads to various Mullerian anomalies. So, if they sort of don't fuse, then you will get uterus diadelphys, where you will have two uterine horns and sometimes two cervices, and if the septum persists, you can get two vaginas as well. If it is only partially reabsorbed, then you get bicornuate uterus. If further partially, then you get a septate uterus, and if it's just a dimple on the top of the fundus, that will be an arcuate uterus. Although the upper part of the ducts remains separate, forming the fallopian tubes. The lower end of the fused Mullerian ducts beyond the uterine cavity remains solid. It proliferates and forms a solid cord, which will canalize in future, forming the upper 1/3 of the vagina, which opens in urogenital sinus. The lower 2/3 of the vagina, upper 2/3 of the vagina is from Mullerian duct, and lower 1/3 of the vagina is from ectoderm, and that is the sensitive part. At the entry of the urogenital sinus, part of Mullerian tubercle persists, and it forms the hymen. So as you can see the gonads, paramesonephric duct, and the mesonephric duct. And you can see the two paramesonephric ducts are fused caudally, and that will form eventually the uterus, and the free part of them will form the fallopian tubes. And you can see the ovary along with its ovarian ligament, which will be eventually connected to the uterus. Now, the external genitalia development. In early stages, the gut and the urogenital ducts open into a common cloaca. During 5th week, a septum develops between allantois and the hindgut, which will eventually fuse with the cloacal membranes, separating cloaca between rectum dorsally and a urogenital sinus ventrally, because urethral as well as vaginal opening is in the same place. That's why it's a urogenital sinus. By the end of the 7th week, the urogenital membrane breaks down and urogenital sinus opens to the surface. And as the developing uterus and vagina push downwards, it leads to elongation and narrowing of the upper part of the urogenital sinus, which will ultimately form the urethra. Around the urogenital sinus, the genital tubercle will develop into clitoris in a female and a glans penis in a male child. The urethral folds will form the urethra. Genital swellings become labia majora, and the leftover swelling becomes labia minora. And as you can see in this diagram, you can see how both male and female genitalia are formed. So the genital tubercle will become either clitoris or glans. The urethral folds will be covered and will become urethra, and the labioscrotal swellings will become labia majora and minora in a female, whereas they will become scrotum in male child. The epithelial buds arise from urethra and urogenital sinuses, and in males they develop into prostate gland. In females they will develop into urethral glands. The urogenital buds give rise to paraurethral glands of skin, and two small buds posteriorly they form the Bartholin's glands. As in the female, a mesodermal mass, the urogenital septum grows downwards and separates the urogenital sinus from the rectum and anus. The urogenital portion of the cloacal membrane, it disintegrates, disappears, and an open gutter is formed through which the urine drains. And the gutter continues anteriorly with the primitive urethral groove on the phallus. The ectoderm on the undersurface of the phallus disappears, exposing the underlying endodermal plate, which eventually hollows, forming the primary urethral groove. The hollow endodermal plate is drawn back into the body of phallus, and in this process it forms a tube, and the ectodermal surface is then restored. Simultaneously, the urethral folds are approximated and fuse, making the urethra. The testis will descend into the labioscrotal swelling, which then become distended and move medially to form the scrotum. So as you can see, the top diagram is undifferentiated gonads, where both paramesonephric and mesonephric ducts are there. And you can see in female, the paramesonephric ducts will form uterus and fallopian tubes, ovary with its two ligaments, and the upper two-thirds of the vagina. Whereas in male, the same paramesonephric ducts will regress, and the Wolffian duct system will develop into penis, prostate, urethra, seminal vesicles, and testis, which will eventually descend into the labioscrotal swelling. Thank you.